are human beings. We are all the same.
I believe I'm being threatened by a nun.
I got goosebumps when you say that.
I'm so grateful you're here. I'm Adrienne Bankert. We are starting something new here on NewsNation. Consider this. Every major news headline, from COVID to the Israel-Hamas war, is tied to what a person values, their belief system, what they believe is sacred. And that is so many times connected to a person's faith, which influences how they vote. In our new series, One Nation Under God, faith and the biggest news headlines are discussed head-on. NewsNation is news for all America, and the majority of us, even those who don't attend church, believe in God, according to the latest Gallup poll, which undeniably colors how we view our world and what actions we take to change it. Like the issue of immigration, many believe it would take a miracle to solve the crisis at our border. There's this new movie out about a savvy and determined nun, Mother Frances Cabrini, who changed the way America treated immigrants. Angel Studios debuting the film Cabrini this Women's History Month. I chatted with the film's director about whether or not the film holds clues for helping solve our modern-day chaos at the border.
In America, the greatest nation on earth, rats have it better than the children of 5 points.
I was told that you were rejected by 3 different orders, each time for weakness of constitution.
Your Holiness, we can serve our weakness or we can serve our purpose, not both.
You didn't just break the prejudice of this is a movie all about nuns. You also broke the prejudice, potentially, of anyone in their perception of immigrants quite early in the film. What was your process, especially with your own journey, in terms of helping the audience to perhaps view this with a little more compassion?
Well, more than anything, you know, this film really helped me to explore my own immigrant story. And one thing that is really powerful about this country is that, yes, this country has a lot of challenges, especially when you're an immigrant. But this is an immigrant that came here with nothing, literally with nothing, came here as a woman in a time that women in the United States have no voice. And in some cases, they couldn't even own land. And here's a woman, immigrant woman, that came with nothing, that had to defy all the racism that was going on. Racism was very, very present against the Italian people. And she was still, against all that, was able to build an empire as big as any Rockefeller or Vanderbilt against all odds. And on top of that, she even defied her own death. So this is a film that celebrates the power of a woman, the power of the human spirit, and more importantly, the power of someone who is dedicating the entire life to fight for the voiceless. And that's why I connected so much with this story. I said, I can't believe I didn't know who she was, to make a film that everybody could relate, because at the end, we're all facing our own battles, our giants. And this is the ultimate underdog story. And I don't say this, I'm just quoting people, but one thing that I hear over and over and over is the impact that the film is having on the audience. You know, I have heard things, I came in one person and I'm leaving a different person. You know, it's really, really having a massive impact in the audience and leaving them in a state of reflection. And at the end, to me, that is the most powerful thing to create in a film.
So in light of that, what kind of people do you want to have leave the theater once they see this film? You know, you say that people say they were a different person when they left. What kind of person are they once they watch Cabrini?
We're all facing any kind of fights, you know, in our lives. You know, everybody. I think you're going to stop facing a battle as long as you're alive. And one of the things that constantly it inspires them to keep fighting, whatever it is. If they're fighting a disease, cancer, or an addiction, or they're going through a divorce, or any case, they at the end they say, you know what, this inspires me to give it one more shot, one more fight. That's one thing that I hear. And the other one is, it also kind of reveals our selfishness as human beings. You know, we tend to live for ourselves for the most part. I'm guilty of that. And even myself, when I see the movie, it inspires me to see what I can do to make this world a better world. Like, you know, we've gotten very accustomed to be driving around and seeing homeless people and not doing nothing about it. Maybe give them $1. And a lot of the time asking them their name, you're kind of giving them their dignity back. You know, what's your name? What's your last name? Spend a little time with these people. It's interesting now. Every day we're getting more used to with, especially I live in Los Angeles, and I'm seeing cities of tents in the streets. And it's almost like we've been trying to normalize that. And that shouldn't be normal. You know, I wish if I end up in the streets one day and I'm homeless, that somebody gives me a hand. And that's also a common thread that the audiences are coming out with.
You know, as you're speaking, Alejandro, I didn't plan on even saying this, but the thing that is most beautiful about this movie and Cabrini's real life story is that she didn't just go around handing out bread. She actually created, like you said, an empire of hope. She built hospitals. She built orphanages. She was able, with her just faith and blood, sweat, and tears, appeal to people who are wealthy and ask them for help. And they gave her land and they helped her with buildings and just the boldness that she had. And I think that she created some system that would address the holistic needs of the human. And too many times in our culture, perhaps we need to shine a light on people who are actually doing that. There are brilliant people today, modern day Cabrinis, who don't get the limelight.
Yes, you know, I got goosebumps when you say that. It's true. We need to celebrate the people, the warriors that are out there fighting that fight and shining a light on their lives, so they can continue on. You know, I like to make movies that proposes themes. I'm not in the business of giving answers. I'm looking for answers myself. But I like to propose questions, and this is one that we live in America. You know, she was not necessarily about immigration policy. She was about the immigrant, the human being. She knew that she needed to build a bridge with those that disagree with her in order to build a change. And that's one thing that I take from her. We live in a very divided world, especially here, and we need to build bridges. We don't have to agree. I think actually I don't like people to agree. I think disagreement is what makes the greatest societies. But we need to build bridges to work on the things that we do agree. And the things that we don't agree, that's great. We have the right to not agree, but there's many things that we do agree, and we should build bridges to, you know, achieve those things that that can really help this country, especially with homelessness, especially with what we're facing right now with immigration. Is we need to build bridges and discuss these very important subject matters and figure out what is it that we can do. And Cabrini, the film in itself, to me, that's a bridge. It opens up to a conversation that a lot of people agree with. And that's why I'm excited that, you know, people go see the film. And again, we're a little movie. We're still a little movie. We don't have, you know, the $100 million budget for marketing. Our billboards is the audience, is the word of mouth. And that's why it's so important that people, you know, continue to go see the film. You know, we have incredible response from the critics, which to me, I am very honored for that, because, you know, the critics really embraced this film, and now we need the audience to come and go through this odyssey.
Yeah, and really, you said, you know, that you make a movie not because you have the answers, but you're searching for them yourselves. But I think through telling stories like this, where we shine a light on those heroes of our American history, of our global history, it does prompt us to see a hope of answers. One more question for you as you talk about, you know,
Sure.
You're in 3,000 movie theaters, and you are still a relatively small movie, though we've seen with Angel Studios and the work you did last summer with The Sound of Freedom, that small movies, or initially small movies, can have a humongous impact. This movie has themes of faith woven throughout, not just the fact that she's a Catholic nun, but just in her wholehearted belief that God would use her to save people from poverty, to change people's lives, and eventually change the world. How much do you think that people today are craving these stories where faith is part of a central theme because they need some faith themselves?
I mean, I think faith it's part of our human experience. I believe we all have some kind of faith, whatever belief system we have. Even you know, my brothers that have a complete different belief, whether they believe in God or not, it requires faith if you are facing any challenge. And one of the things that makes this movie universal is, imagine the amount of faith that she needed. Her projects were projects that she knew was going to take 10 to 15 years it was going to take her that long. But the doctors were telling her that she had 1 year to 2 years to live. So if somebody tells me I have 1 year to live, I'm not going to, and I have a movie that is going to take me 9 years to make, I don't know if I would actually embark into making the movie knowing that I have 1 year to live. It requires a lot of faith, also a lot of will to go on with what you are called to do, with that mission that is in your heart, you know, and I feel that it's a common, you know, the problem is when we start labeling anything, especially faiths. It's like, well, my faith is different than your faith, and that to me divides. I just think that we all have a common faith, you know, and in this case, yes, you know, Mother Cabrini had her faith in God. There's no question about it. But also she had a lot of faith in humanity. She believed that other people, there were so many other characters in the film that didn't share her faith, but they ended up helping her. You know, even though all the way to the mayor of New York, to people that were living in the streets, prostitute and so on, that kind of end up, you know, jumping on her ship to try to, you know, change the world. It's what we call the power of one, you know, is a lot of people think is like you have to have this army to change the world. I think, you know, this movie shows the power of one, and it shows, you know, the ultimate underdog story.
Alejandro Monteverde, Cabrini is out in theaters now. Thank you so much for joining us here. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your time.
Absolutely. Thank you, Cristiana, for being here. I was able to watch the film, and from the beginning, you know, this breathless young man running towards the camera, you're curious about the movie, and you find out truly just how dire and how life and death the situation was at the time of Francesca Cabrini. But in terms of what she was able to accomplish as a woman, why haven't we heard more about her?
I have a feeling that is very much part of the male-driven narrative that we've been subject to as the world. You know, the world has always been subject to a very male-driven narrative historically. So it is one other missing piece in history that we ought to know. So I guess, yes, I guess that's mainly the reason why we don't know much about her. And I believe it's also because some people, especially such special people like her, they were never, you know, they never made history because they wanted to be remembered. They made it because they wanted to change the world. And sometimes it happens that, you know, we forget about them. We lose bits along the way, and we have to thank people who will, you know, go back and pick up the little crumbs that we've left behind to, you know, and the little pieces that are missing to complete the puzzle. So I'm really glad that now the story has come back, you know, it's come to life and is now in the spotlight.
I mean, her name is on so many. I mean, her name is on the Statue of Liberty on a plaque. Her name is a neighborhood here in Chicago. She happened to die here in the Windy City. Her name is on so many schools all across the United States, and yet most of us, including myself, had no idea the history of Cabrini. What do you believe that women today can take away from her life and her story?
First of all, the fact that her name is pretty much everywhere and we don't know about her, it kind of tells us something about ourselves. Too often, we don't stop and ask ourselves, why, or what's the history behind that name, or why is that school called Cabrini? You know, we just take it as it is, and we don't question ourselves enough. And that's I think it's very relevant to today. We stop asking questions, and I think we should a little bit more. But in terms of what women could take from it, well, definitely, again, it is a piece of narrative that was missing, and it will be a never-ending subject for us to explore roles that historically we've been able to inhabit, such as, a nun or a politician or I don't know, famous actresses in the past. We've been it all. It's amazing how much is there to tell. And I just think that women, once they understand that, and once they go to the theatre to see the movie, they see how fearless she was, regardless of the fact that she was a nun, because that's not the first thing, that we as filmmakers wanted to address. We wanted to make a film about a woman who was able to change the history of American history, and therefore the history of the world, because it does impact the history of the world. Once you go and see this fearless, tiny and fragile woman, acting towards what she believed and her values, then I think women will feel more empowered, and it will only be a plus to see that she was a nun as well, because you would never imagine that a nun would do anything like it. You would just, place it, even the prejudice that someone might have or might not have towards, a woman who wears the habit. You would associate the things together and have a better vision of what women can achieve. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
It's so broad, it's so broad what we can do. Whatever habit, whatever we're wearing, whatever we are, whatever our role, we can do so much more than people think.
Yeah, she transcended the fact that she was a nun. I mean, she was canonized as the first American saint. I mean, it's just remarkable. You hear more about her story. I researched her so much. Just seeing the trailer was very inspiring. She lived by a verse. It was a verse written in the Bible by the Apostle Paul, Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. At one point in the movie, you actually say those words. For those who are watching this movie who are people of faith, do you hope that they walk away from the film, whether they're man or woman, inspired that they can do more than perhaps they thought they could do before?
Totally. When you read the Bible, or in that regard, any religious book, really, faith isn't something that stays within you. It prompts you to put your values into action, and that's exactly what Cabrini did. So I would say that it's definitely something that people who are strongly faith-driven, it's something they can learn from her. And from that particular verse, you find strength in your faith, but you are the one person that puts that into action, to actively do something and improve your world. This film for me was very much around a sense of responsibility, not just the work I did, but what she represented. Responsibility that we have towards each other. The very salvific idea of someone coming and saving the poor and the sick and the disadvantaged, the forgotten by God people, which is, it's a contradiction to say it like that, but, that very salvific idea is actually even more powerful when you understand that the Savior doesn't come to lift that burden from your shoulders. It actually teaches you how you should do it, how you should help one another. So we should never feel that responsibility is taken away from us and put into someone else's hands who will do the work for us. You still find strength in your faith, but you are the one who, again, puts it into action.
When contemplating this role, obviously you did your own research. I read somewhere that you listened to Pavarotti while you were preparing. Is that true?
It is true. It's very true, actually. Yes, at some point, Alejandro told me that he would have used a lot of opera music. There is an opera singer in the film. There's a character, Enrico Di Salvo, and it's very much part of the Italian culture, especially at the time. So I just thought that maybe because music is such a great instrument to unlock things within you, it really opens doors and helps you understand at a more deeper level. It helps you understand reality. Then I just thought maybe I should, be influenced by Pavarotti's voice and read the script as if it was a soundtrack to the script. Well, and that's what I did.
And certainly, I know that, and you've spoken about this. I've read articles at least about how relevant the story is today. Obviously, Europe is facing an immigration catastrophe, I would say, is maybe one word, or crisis is a word. And then there are people who are just, risking their lives to get to another country from their native land here in the United States. Obviously, the subject of immigration is not going anywhere. It's a tale as old as time. But in the way that Sister Cabrini or Mother Cabrini addressed it, what lessons do you believe that we could apply from learning her history to the immigration stories of today?
We all peoples have been emigrants and immigrants from one land to another at some point in our history. So we should always be more respectful of this phenomenon. What she's proven, and that's why her story is so contemporary, is that there is no world without inclusion and integration. She had a clear vision of that world, of a more equal society in that sense. The two things that she favored were education and healthcare. She made sure that all the immigrants could speak the language and could feel more part of the American family because they already were part of it in some way and at some degree. And she made sure that they were looked after health-wise, so that they could be, contributors, workers, active citizens of the new world, because eventually they would have been. And she knew the game, it was all a political game, because at the end she has this confront. I mean, I'm spoiling, and whoever is
spoiler alert
now. Yeah, spoiler alert. But she knew that they would be the future voters of the country. I take a bit of pride in, when I talk about the future mayor of New York being Italian. I take pride in that line very much so, because it's very meaningful. So I just believe that she had a very clear vision of a world of inclusion and integration. She understood the value of integration, which as an Italian is something that I very sadly have to say is still missing in our country, considering what's happening in the Mediterranean. Just to give you an example, Italy is one of the few countries that don't have the jus soli, which is the right to be an Italian citizen if you're born in the country. We don't apply that, unfortunately. So yeah, I just think she did that for us, and she's still teaching us that lesson.
One quick question. We have about 90 seconds for those watching this conversation, whether they are of faith or not, whether they are familiar at all with this history or the Catholic Church. Again, the trailer gets your attention. Why should people go to the theaters and see Cabrini?
I think people should go because it's a movie without borders, I'd like to say. It is a movie that speaks to everybody, regardless of their religious beliefs. You know, faith isn't just something that comes necessarily from God. If it comes from God and you're a believer, that's even better. But if you don't, if you're not a religious person, faith, it also means that you have faith that things there is hope. Faith is faith, and it goes together with hope.
Now, when Mother Cabrini was alive, she'd faced a lot of criticism for establishing, say, a hospital or a boarding school serving the upper class. But she had a vision. She would use that location and the surplus tuition and payments of more well-off families to fund free services for Italians in poorer neighborhoods, eventually opening up a second or a third hospital or school. And it became a successful model in her day. Today, we know that food, clothing, legal help, and other social services are provided free through the Cabrini Shrine in New York City. We're told with the current influx of people arriving to Manhattan from the U.S.-Mexico border, there is now a 2-month-long waiting list. Watch more stories right here for One Nation Under God each and every Thursday.